So today we're here with Elizabeth Muller, the Assistant State Attorney at the 13th Judicial Circuit, who is also the County Court Domestic Violence Supervisor. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing great. So just to start off, what types of cases do you deal with here, and generally, what do you deal with here?
So in our office, generally, we prosecute all crimes that occur within Hillsborough County. So that's going to be everything ranging from homicides all the way down to driving without a valid driver's license. And specifically, what my role is within the office is I supervise. There's 2 attorneys in the county court division who prosecute solely domestic violence related crimes. So those are going to be crimes of domestic violence battery, domestic violence assault, and violations of domestic violence injunctions are the primary cases that we deal with in my division.
So from what you've experienced here in the course, the cases you've dealt with, how do these specific cases affect public health in our community?
Well, I would say they are one of the greatest ways of all the cases we deal with. Domestic violence certainly affects the health and the safety of our community. Domestic violence is a really unique crime because it occurs between people who know each other. So if you think about a crime like petty theft or burglary, your car might get broken into and you usually don't know the person who's breaking into your car. But with domestic violence, it's a crime that involves intimate partners. And so it can be a very there's a lot of safety concerns with people who are victims of domestic violence. It can be your own home is oftentimes unsafe. And so there's definitely a lot of health and safety concerns within Hillsborough County related to domestic violence issues.
And so with the individuals in these cases, what usually happens and how are they affected before or after, during?
Yeah, so victims go through they can go through a lot of trauma depending on, if they have children together. It can be a very difficult situation. It's very easy for people to wonder why people who are being abused by their intimate partners don't just leave, but it's really not as simple as that most of the time. A lot of times there's economic components. Maybe the person who's being abused doesn't have their own job and they're dependent on the person who is abusing them. And again, maybe they have children in common, and often, they still love that person and there's a history there. And so we try to do as much as we can, either both through the attorneys and the victims assistance office that we have here, to try to educate the victims and make them understand some of the extra issues that are present in the cases.
Is it just generally for all of us? How does awareness of these issues mitigate or lessen these effects?
So I think awareness is really important. I think that we would all probably be surprised to know how many people we may encounter in our day-to-day life that are potentially victims of intimate partner violence. I mean, if you can start to become aware of some of the signs, whether it's financial control over the individual, maybe they only have one car and they're not allowed to go places unless their significant other, drops them off. Whether it's making comments, maybe if you're out with a group of friends and you hear, somebody's partner say derogatory terms to them that kind of are starting that process of breaking them down. Being aware of some of the physical signs, you hear kind of the cliche of maybe wearing a turtleneck or long sleeves when it's hot out, kind of trying to cover a lot of makeup on their face, big sunglasses, all those kinds of things that you see sometimes in movies or on TV, but they're based in reality. So I think being aware of these issues as citizens, whether it's through your friends, your family, people you work with, maybe even just people you kind of interact with on a daily basis, you'd be surprised sometimes you see people fighting out on the street and it's very easy to sort of want to turn the other way, but we get people who are bystanders to our cases sometimes, and having them be aware of how important it is to come in and help us prove our case is really important. So I think just if you have friends, you have family, not that you should always be on hyper vigilant necessarily, but start to kind of pay attention to some relationships. You get that kind of gut feeling sometimes when you know something maybe isn't right.
Yeah, so in terms of when you do see these telltale signs, what can you recommend for individuals in our community regarding domestic violence, prevention of or reporting of, or just anything pertaining to it in general?
I think one of the biggest things is just being there for the person. We've all been in situations, whether it's friendships or relationships, where just because somebody tells you that they're seeing something that maybe isn't positive, you're not just going to all of a sudden, drop that person. And a lot of times the nature of these relationships is such that the abuser has, more power over that victim than we may realize. So I think being aware of the signs and sort of again, just being there as a friend, being there as a support system, so that they do feel comfortable sharing their experience with you, and that if and when they're able to leave that person, or they're open to sort of some, commentary, or kind of pointing it out in a gentle way of, maybe this isn't as normal as you think.
So that concludes our interview. This was Elizabeth Muller, the Assistant State Attorney at the 13th Judicial Circuit, and is also the Domestic Violence Supervisor here. Thank you so much for interviewing with us today.
Thanks for talking with me. I enjoyed it.